Hello, everybody. Welcome to Birds Explored. We have a new series. So we are going to talk about today very interesting bird after woodpeckers, after owls with George Lante. So we have another very interesting episode. So today I have a special guest. I'm gonna with Peter, but right now, I should say Peter today is gonna be special guest for us because we are talking about his PhD. So so we are talking about his PhD means we are talking about common grackle today. I mean, it's a very common bird. It's very interesting bird. So I think you all like the presentation and the story that we got together. I helped Peter a little bit, but he finished his PhD successfully. I mean, he did a very nice work, deal with all these specimens. Well, solved some taxonomical problems, but it's very interesting bird species in North America. So I'm not going to give more details. I just take the Peter to studio, at the stage. Hello.
Hi, Utku.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm fine, better. And today I'm excited because we are talking about common grackles. This is your
Yeah.
bird.
My
So
bird. Yes, it's mine. Yes.
you got your using these bird problems. So
Right.
I'm
So you must.
we
So the chaffinch must be your bird.
my bird. Yeah,
Yeah.
chaffinch, my bird. All turacos are
Oh
my
yeah.
bird.
Okay.
One day we can talk about turacos also. So
Yeah.
yesterday I gave a talk in the British Ornithologist Club about turacos. They really like it. I just try to make, simple the case. There are lots of birds. I mean, you know the story. You heard many times.
Mhm.
But so the turacos and chaffinches. But one day we will talk in the Birds Explored series about turacos and chaffinches. But
Yeah, for
today
sure.
we are going to talk about common grackle, which
Great.
is very important bird.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you very much to be here, and you
Yeah.
should
Sure.
just give some introduction about this bird. I'm gonna leave the stage just to you.
Okay. All right. So as you know, since you helped a lot with the work on the common grackle, it's a widespread blackbird species in North America. It's found in North
Yeah,
America only, and it is a member of the true blackbird family, the North American blackbirds, the Icteridae. And I guess not everybody who watches this is going to recognize them if they see them, because other people in other parts of the world are watching this. But you'll see photos and illustrations. It's a really beautiful bird. It looks entirely black. It's about half the size of a crow, maybe, and it's entirely black. But it has structural elements in its feathers that make the feathers iridescent. So the
mhm.
common grackles have purple iridescence or violet iridescence, blue iridescence, and green iridescence, and they're distributed from eastern British Columbia all the way across the top of southern Canada and North America into New England, and then down into Florida, and then back up um, through Texas, um, uh, east of the Rockies. You don't
Very
find
wide
them wide distribution, right? And I remember the bird quite well when I was growing up as a little kid on the South Shore of Long Island. I remember grackles; we'd see them, and was always sort of interested in them. They were very common. They would be there in the fall during migration. During the spring and the summer, we'd find nests as kids in bamboo and in ivy and conifers. They were very common. And I didn't think much about them, but then when I started getting interested in birds, one of my early bird books by Roger Torrey Peterson, a bird guide, said that there are two kinds of common grackle. There's the bronzed grackle and the purple grackle. And the bronzed grackle was sort of the western one, and it was big, and it had a bronzy iridescent sheen on its back, and it was easily identifiable. And then there was the so-called purple grackle, that was the form that I would have seen as a kid in New York. A little smaller than the bronze, but purplish in color, violet kind of iridescence. But then I didn't think about grackles very much or blackbirds in general, and then an opportunity came along to do some studies that would result in a degree, and started finding out a lot of things about the common grackle, and that there were, I guess, 3 recognized subspecies. So it's a single species, Quiscalus quiscula, and there are 3 recognized subspecies, Quiscula, stone eye, and versicolor. And there was also another subspecies described, ridgeway eye, which was sort of an intermediate between these two. Anyway, it was a very messy taxonomy, as you know.
Right.
And I didn't realize that there was such a real diversity in these forms. And so I got interested in trying to tease out the history of how these things were named and described. And as we go along with the illustrations, we can point out to the audience these characteristics that led to the splitting up of the subspecies of this bird. And then we can talk about our work, modern work, using genetics and morphometrics and new analyses to niche modeling stuff, all kinds of things.
Okay.
And we, as you know, we've come to some conclusions that it may not be too popular with some people, may be popular with others, but we found some things out.
Interesting questions in it. So may I take the presentation to the stage? If you,
of course.
Yeah, if you are okay. So here you go.
Right.
So, right. So this is maybe this is not a better. I mean, I think this is better. So we can see the slide is better. So
right.
I said I use one of the paper that we published together, Subspecies Differentiation in the Common Grackle, Integrating Morphometry and Mitochondrial DNA. So we published in Biological Journal of Linnean Society. Well, it was a nice publication.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess I can talk a little bit about this slide here. Right, indeed, that's the title of one of our papers on common grackles. Also, another co-author is Mark Fellows at based in the UK. But that's a painting by Dale Dyer.
Your advisor, the Mark, yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's a watercolor painting by Dale Dyer, a very prominent and talented bird illustrator, and it shows these 3 subspecies that ornithologists had placed the common grackle into. So we'll just describe them a little bit. The one on the top, these are all painted by specimens I collected, by the way. I spent a lot of time in the field collecting these common grackles and making study skins, and Dale used 3 of the skins from each of the 3 forms for these paintings. So that painting is of actual specimens that were in the hand. So on the top is the bronze grackle, Quiscula versicolor, and it's ever since the late 1800s, early 1900s, when Frank Chapman and others were trying to figure out the taxonomic positions of these subspecies, they called that one the bronzed grackle, or versicolor, the subspecies, and it's the biggest one of the 3. And as you can see, it's kind of got a bronzy sheen to the body. The iridescence is kind of a bronze on the wings and the breast and the back. The head is almost always blue reflectance. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's violet, but that's rare. Most of the time they're blue. And that's the most migratory of the 3 common grackle subspecies. They have a wide breeding distribution east of the Rockies, although a couple of them are showing up now in California, and there's a couple of records from Alaska and British Columbia they breed as well, in eastern British Columbia, a small population. But in the fall and the winter, a lot of them, maybe most of the population, moves down into the Gulf states and further south. The bird in the middle is so-called Stone's grackle, or Quiscula stone-eye. And this is the bird of the Atlantic region. It's found along the coast of the mid-Atlantic states and the lower Atlantic states, inland to the Appalachians, or Appalachians, however people pronounce it.
Eastern part of North America.
Eastern part of North America, right. And this is the bird that I was most familiar with as a kid. This is the one I remember. Although the bronze one at the top, during migration, would show up in New York, down where I live too. They show up in northern New York, but I would see them on the South Shore of Long Island, which was kind of south of their breeding range. They sort of, as they migrate, they sort of leapfrog over Stone's grackle, or the purple grackle.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly enough, the bird on the bottom. Now, this is I up until fairly recently, I didn't know this bird even existed. This is the so-called Florida grackle. It's Quiscalus quiscula. It's the nominant subspecies. This is the first one described by Linnaeus in 1758 from a painting that was sent to him from North America by Mark Catesby. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about how that happened too, but we don't need to get into all of that now. But this Florida grackle is non-migratory, and it's restricted to the southeastern states, Florida, of course, but also Georgia and the Gulf states, where it does meet the bronze grackle in the northwestern part of the range. So there's a lot of overlap between these three subspecies. Now, there's also a fourth bird called Ridgway's grackle, which an ornithologist, I believe in 1919, Frank Oberholzer, considered another species, named it for Robert Ridgway. So we have Quiscalus quiscula ridgwayi. Turns out that that's a hybrid between these forms, between bronze and Florida, or bronze and so-called purple, and so on. So and these birds were given various names over those years, between the late 1800s to the 1940s and 50s. It kind of remained the same, where we have these three subspecies, but there's always been some controversy and talk about what they really are. Sometimes they were considered separate species, and then subspecies again, and then back to species, and so on, depending on the authority that you read. But you and I and Mark, we wanted to try to use some modern technique to try and see if what exactly was the evolutionary history of these birds and their relationship to each other now, and perhaps even what's going on in the future in terms of where their range might expand. So we used a lot of neat
subspecies.
Yes, we wound up getting rid of basically stone-eye, and subsuming versicolor and what used to be called stone-eye into each other. So we wind up with just the Florida grackle, and then everything else in the north.
We will have some slides, and then we will show the audience some results. So, okay, I'm gonna move to second slide.
Yep.
And this is the surprising slide.
Oh, that's the surprise.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah. I hope it's gonna work. Just a second. Oh no. So this is a video actually. So I put some video, but I think
doesn't want to play.
No, because of this software that we are using. So it's a 1-minute video I found in YouTube. So I can share after we finish this presentation. I can share when we upload this presentation to YouTube. I can share the link. So somebody else actually made a very short introduction and some behavior of the common grackle. So this one, which subspecies is this one?
That's versicolor. That's a bronze grackle.
The common one, yeah.
Hmm.
The big distribution range,
The
yeah.
big one. Yep. Hmm. You
Yeah,
can tell by the bronzy back and sides, a little bit
right,
of violet in the wing, and almost always a blue head.
right. I
Yeah,
thought it's gonna be work, but sorry for the audience, so it's not
that's
gonna
all right.
work. But you can see the picture, so I can move to another slide,
Hmm.
the next slide. So we did some morphometric analysis before we moved to genetic analysis, and then we got some interesting results. So, I mean, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, I'll talk about the methods of
Right,
measurement, and then maybe you can talk about what the box plots represent and that sort of thing.
right, of
Without too
course.
much detail, we don't need too much detail. It's pretty easy to see
No,
there.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can just say the simple stuff, and if the audience want to get more information, they can look at the paper. Yeah,
yeah. So right. So I measured thousands of common grackle specimens.
right. I mean, it's a
I
good work.
measured over 2,000 in the American Museum of Natural History, including a reference series that Frank Chapman used to do most of his work on the common grackle in the late 19th
Yes,
century and early 20th century. So that was an example of how useful these old collections are. But
yes,
I knew that we needed, for the genetic work and for some of the morphometric work, for the skeletal measurements, I knew we needed more specimens. And so under permit, I collected another, oh God, I don't even remember, it was over 300 fresh grackles, I guess. I don't remember, in Florida and Iowa, New Jersey, New York. And then I borrowed some more specimens from other museums to kind of cover the range of the common grackle, all three described forms. And as you know, we take measurements from study skins. We measure the length of the bill, the depth of the bill, the length of the leg, the length of the wing, and we get a data set of those external measurements. With the fresh birds and with a small collection of skeletons that were already available, we did, I think, what was it, 10 skeletal measurements
yes,
on all of the birds as well. And I don't remember if it's in this analysis, but we also did mass for the freshly collected birds. So that's, weight. Those birds were weighed. The birds in the historical collections didn't necessarily have a weight on them, so the fresh specimens were important to get. And of course, back in the old days, nobody was keeping tissue to do DNA work. No one was looking at DNA. And so from the fresh specimens that we collected, we also got nice, fresh, good tissue for
yeah,
DNA. And then
right,
we did this kind of analysis, which maybe you can explain here, showing some of the results of some of that.
right. I will. So, I mean, here in this plot, I mean, in this figure, so we have three different colors on the map. So, which means three different subspecies, well, traditionally recognized before based on some morphological analysis. But Peter got lots of measurements, and Peter got lots of different measurements, different morphological measurements, both external and internal, the skeletal measurements. But we only used we used both of them. But we got all the external measurements made as some multivariate analysis, which is called principal component analysis. Try to get a one information, one value that indicates the body size. Then we try to understand what is the size pattern within the species based on the geography. Then we understand between different subspecies. I mean, the Florida is the smallest one, but this based on the body size. But Florida has also longer bill length than others, relatively longer bill length. when you compare the body size. So the other two subspecies, we got male and females. Other two subspecies not really have differentiated body size pattern. They mostly the overlap. We got some ecogeographical rules. We got some support for the ecogeographical rules. When you go north, the body size getting bigger and bigger. But this is the migratory bird, and we made some comparison between different subspecies, and then two different subspecies, at least two of them, stone-eye and versicolor, mostly the overlap, and we try to show this overlap using this map and this box plot figure.
Right.
We just
if I could just say a
Right.
couple of things, since
course.
the bills certainly are shorter in the northern birds and longer in the southern birds, which is also one of the ecological rules. As you go north, you tend to have shorter extremities.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also would like to say that this work was largely confirmatory. See, I'm a real proponent of kind of checking some of the old conclusions in scientific experiments and so on. So it had been said already in many papers that the Florida bird was the smallest and bronze was the largest, etc., etc. And I believe at least one other older paper used principal component analysis as well, but we used some more modern versions. So it's really kind of nice to have this confirmatory information. So those folks who were working on this bird in terms of the size and all of that, they were right. It's
true. And also,
yeah.
I want to say you got the bigger sample size than before.
Right. So
I think
using
difference.
using more data points is even more important to sort of confirm some of this older material. But it's really nice that it all kind of fit together. It was concordant with theirs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So while this wasn't entirely new in terms of the conclusions, a lot of the methodology was different than from what they had used. Yeah,
that's true. So on the map, I used three different colors. We used three different colors, indicates the three different subspecies. But we reach some other conclusion. Well, we are going to show the audience later. So I'm going to moving to another one. So yeah, we talked about morphometric analysis. So this kind of the abstract information for the morphometric analysis here, we got all these measurements and use the principal component analysis to differentiate the subspecies based on the physical and external measurements and internal measurements. So this is again the map. I just put some information here. This is the red line between Florida and the other subspecies. But based on the morphology and also some genetic data, we lumped some of them, Peter, right? So that's why I put here the red line. So you can explain if you want to.
Well, that red line is, pretty much historically where the Florida birds, the nominate form, the small one with the longer bill, everything below that line is that's the kind of bird you'd find. You wouldn't. There's a little bit of variation in the plumage as you go north into Georgia. Maybe the back is a little bit more variegated. It's not as solid green. But anyway, those are details anybody can look at. But and the other thing that's important to realize is that those Florida birds below that red line are not migratory. And they get all the way down into the Florida Keys. I don't know if there are any records from the Caribbean. I don't think so. Caribbean islands. But everything above that is something different than the so-called Florida grackle. The versicolor and so-called stone eye, the other two subspecies, they don't make it down into Florida. Even there are no records of bronze grackle in Florida or stone's grackle in Florida. So even though they're migratory, they in the fall and the winter, those northern birds don't really get down into the range of the resident Florida bird.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, this is the series of the birds with the different head colors.
Yeah. Those are
Could you please explain this? Still, we are talking about morphology.
Yeah. Well, this is Frank Chapman's original series. He was interested in coloration in these birds and to some extent size. And these are study skins. If our audience isn't familiar with study skins, it's just a bird that's been collected in the field, and then the skin has been taken off the body and preserved and stuffed with cotton, and then you can store them easily in museum trays and drawers and cabinets. Right. This is a nice series here. So on the left, all the way on the left, is a Florida grackle. So the nominant, Quiscalus, quiscula.
Yeah.
And you can see it has a violet head, kind of a bottle green back, and some blue iridescence in the tail. The one next to that is Chapman's next type. We're going north. We're going from left to right. We're going north, and you can see the plumage change and the size change to some extent as you move north with these specimens. So the bird next to that one, the second one from the left, that's also a so-called Florida grackle, but it's a more northern one, a little more variegated on the back. The head appears bluish, which happens sometimes, but most of the Florida birds have violet heads. And then we move through the intermediate forms until we get to let's see, so-called stone eye would be which bird is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth one or so. Yeah, the fourth one from the left. That's sort of the more North Atlantic one. And then you
just
move.
The middle one. Middle one.
Yeah, and then you start seeing some changes in color in the mantle feathers on the back. There's also differences on the ventral surface of the birds too, and you can see that the skins they seem to be larger. I mean, you'll have to take my word for it. I measured them; they are. And all the way on the right, we wind up with versicolor, this bronze bird, which is the most widely distributed. But you can see there's a whole bunch of sort of intermediate forms in there. And this is what Chapman used to kind of figure out, which subspecies were in which range. But there is a large area of hybridization that runs from Louisiana all the way up into Massachusetts, sort of in between the Bronze Range and the Stone Range. And the Appalachian Mountains or Appalachian Mountains, are not much of a barrier to this bird. They can get across the Eastern Divide. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a lot of hybridization going on. This next slide actually is a really good one.
Yes.
And you can talk about the genetic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Sibley's paintings here.
Right. So with permission.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, David Sibley, the bird artist, gave us permission to use his paintings there. He had actually, during the study, he had put out this on his website, just talking about common grackle and plumage, and it fit nicely. The illustration fit nicely with some of the genetic work we wanted to do. So, right. In addition to color and size that we just talked about a little bit, maybe Utku, you can discuss what we did with the genetic work.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to do that. So Peter collected the birds from the different parts of the North America and also Florida. So we put these collection locations on the map, and we got these tissue samples, and then we use these tissue samples to get the complete mtDNA from the full genome. So we did some next generation sequencing and bioinformatics. So, and then we got the data, 16,000 base pairs, mtDNA data. We didn't use any nuclear stuff, but we got the complete genome from 22 birds, 22 different common grackles. Am I right, Peter? 22, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, yeah, maybe one or two differences. I don't remember. I'd have to look, but yeah, I think so.
But I think 22. Plus,
Yeah,
we put some other published
right,
couple of grackles available in GeneBank, and
right.
we downloaded them to complete mtDNA. In total, I couldn't remember exactly the number, but 24 or 25 different mitochondrial genome available right now in GeneBank, and most of them came from the early study.
Right.
So, and then we try to make some phylogenetic analysis. So we did, I mean, this is the parsimony tree, and we use some bootstrap values. But I want to say the first thing, we found some private haplotypes in Florida. So the Florida looks like a higher genetic diversity than North, which means Florida kind of a refuge area for these bird species, for common grackle. So the ancestral form over there. So we got something from the morphometric analysis. So we know Florida birds smaller than the northern one, the other subspecies, traditionally recognized subspecies. So, and longer bill length. So the different bill shape available in Florida. So, and we got really private haplotypes over there. And then we got the phylogenetic tree, and Florida grackles clusters together, numbered 1 and 2. And outside of the in group, but Florida grackles also has some sharing haplotypes with North. Not many, but there are some. But still, Florida, I'm repeating again, Florida birds has private haplotypes. So the sharing haplotypes means there is an incomplete lineage sorting, or historically there is some gene flow because of these climate change issue, historical climate change issue. Because when we go back to 20,000 years ago, I mean, it was an ice age, and in North America, all this distribution range of the common grackles, the most of the range in the north, under the ice. So they need to find somewhere to survive at that time. So they probably moved to south, this refuge area, and stay there and made some historical gene flow, some hybridization in Florida and the southern part of the distribution range such. So anyway, so this explains, these two things explains the sharing haplotypes, but still we have old private haplotypes and higher genetic diversity in Florida, which means Florida birds is historically different than others. So that finding, because of that finding, we protect the Florida subspecies. But when we look at the north, there is a high gene flow between two different subspecies. If we're talking about subspecies as a rule, when we look in the biological species concept, the between subspecies, I mean, the gene flow should be low or restricted, really restricted. So they started differentiated. I mean, they started going to different species. This is why we call them a subspecies, but both subspecies really high gene flow between them. And they all sharing all mitochondrial DNA, they sharing all these haplotypes. And we couldn't find really private haplotypes really recognizable in one subspecies in the north. And then we found some also morphological evidence, and then we thought it's better to lump versicolor and stonite together, and versicolor, I mean, that form, the historically described before Stone-eye, and then we use versicolor. Am I right, Peter?
Yeah, versicolor was described before Stone-eye. So if
Yeah,
we're
and
gonna
then
lump, yeah. Hmm.
we lumped and we use the versicolor. So this is the story, and then we put all the, I mean, details in the paper, in the biological journal paper, and if the audience wants to get every detail, they can look. But this is kind of the story, and then David Sibley's paintings really match our story, and we did, I mean, this figure and used in the publication. Would you like to, I mean, say something?
Yeah. Well, you can see you can see on there particularly in the birds in the north, uh, the variation. I was out in the field and collected these birds, and in
Right.
Florida, the birds all looked very similar. In Iowa and out west, they looked very similar. As Florida and bronze. But I could collect 10 birds, 10 breeding adult male common grackles in New York or New Jersey uh, on the same day within an hour, and these birds they all look different. I mean, you could see these mix of characters in terms of coloration and so on. So, I guess traditionally those would be considered so-called Ridgway's grackle, which is not a valid subspecies; it's a hybrid.
No.
Um, and then we could talk about some of the mechanisms that might give rise to this. Natural selection, or maybe more importantly, in a bird like this, sexual selection. One of the things to mention is that these birds have elaborate courtship displays, and they have these beautiful iridescent feathers, and they flick their nictitating membranes back and forth when they court and when they mate. So the nictitating membrane that covers the eye of the bird kind of is bluish color. So the males, they sing and they display, they spread their tails, and it's very much like a peafowl, trying to attract a mate. And so when that kind of selection can give rise to these myriad of color variations and size variations. So we don't have to invoke natural selection alone to account for the differences.
Right. Okay, so I'm moving to next one. So, right. I mean, we lumped some subspecies, and right now we have new distribution range based on our findings. So we called northern common grackle and we called the southern common grackle, and two different subspecies. And we made this map. And Peter, yeah, we lumped versicolor and Stone-eye together and then made a one big distribution range in North and middle of America, North America. And then the Florida, the tiny distribution indicates the Florida subspecies.
Now these are, this is an important thing. So you know how it is with this, so we put that forward in the literature. And of course, there are going to be people who dispute our conclusions, and there's always critics, and that's good. It makes it makes for rigorous debate and so on. But if this is true, first of all, it's kind of a simplification, right? With all these different color forms or variations in the north, that it gets, especially in the east, it gets confusing. Is that a purple grackle? Is it a bronze grackle? Is it a hybrid? And since we know that these genes are, all mixed, and there's a lot of hybridization, and the morphometrics seem to comport with it, why not call all those, one subspecies instead of breaking these things up and having a hybrid in there to confuse things? And of course, the Florida birds, non-migratory, retaining the status of the nominate form. But there's more to it than that. The common grackle, over the past 50 years or so, has experienced a very, very sharp population decline, over 50% since 1970. And there are a few papers out now and a few articles now talking about that. And the question is, why? So let me just sort of explain a little bit about
Oh,
the history of the population here. If you look at old ornithology books, if you look at Audubon's ornithological biographies, or you look at some of the 19th century material, common grackles were not that common, certainly not as much as they are now. And the reason for that is that they are not birds of the old growth forests. They're not forest birds. They like marshes, they like streams, they like, areas where there's some moisture. And they like open areas. And so for a large part of the history of North America, there was no logging, there was no clearing land for farms. But in the 19th century and into the 20th century, large areas of forests were cut down for agriculture. And this was something that the common grackle found quite useful. They became pests, agricultural pests on corn crops and rice, and they'll eat all kinds of insects and feed their young little invertebrates. But in the fall and the winter, they'll feed on grains and so on. So farmers, the agricultural authorities kind of despised grackles, and every chance they got, they would give permits to people to wantonly destroy tens of thousands of these birds. And it didn't matter if it was winter or spring or anything like that. It was, all the time. And so we don't know for sure if that's what's causing the decline. But every time I read something new about the decline of the common grackle numbers in North America, they mention sort of the indiscriminate, what we call depredation on crops, agriculture. You can get a permit to kill as many grackles as you want on your farm or, your land. And so that's somewhat alarming and a little bit of a wake-up call, because, here's a bird that expanded its range and increased its population because of the opening up of the forests. But if you consider the limited range of that subspecies in Florida, right, that bird doesn't occur anywhere else. The northern birds is a big range, so maybe they're not in as much trouble if there's unchecked destruction of the birds. But the Florida birds only occupy that little region down in the southeast. And it's a large spot, but it's certainly, if you just look at the map, you can see that if those birds are continuously harassed and destroyed, I could see the Florida subspecies actually getting in trouble. Maybe even disappearing, worst case scenario. So, this is something that conservationists and preservationists and ornithologists and naturalists and government agencies that give permits for taking these grackles out of commission in agricultural places may want to temper that a little bit. Maybe not give complete permits that would allow people to take as many birds as they want. You might want to manage this bird a little more as an agricultural pest. So.
okay. Well, it's a nice information. It's nice for me. Thank you so much. And we did some, the ecological niche modeling analysis, try to get some logical concordance. I mean, we got some phylogenetic results, morphometric results, and we need to get some ecological results. Yeah. And there are different lines of evidence. And at the end, different lines of evidence match all together. So we try to do that. So this is our first paper on this bird. One of the chapter in Peter's thesis. So we got some eBird data. I mean, based on the citizen science, this is the occurrence record. We have lots of occurrence records. I couldn't remember how many, but there are lots of records. I remember, all these bird watchers and birders and people interested in the common grackle, they uploaded the data. So we got this data. Then we made some niche modeling analysis using the climate layers based on the vertically online dataset. And at the end, we got these results. This is the range shift of common grackle from last glacial maximum, LGM, to the present. So the projections show the 10% training presence. I mean, audience can see the details in the paper. One of the paper published in RDA, Dutch Ornithological Society's journal. So, and then we use some logistic thresholds and get these results. And this is the red area here indicates the potential last glacial maximum LGM distribution for this species based on the climatic information. It looks like the match with the Florida Grackle distribution range. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they aren't perfect models, of course, because there's a lot of noise, right? So, the present range there is a little misrepresented, but that I think that's just from background noise too, right?
Of course, yeah, this definitely. Yeah. But when you look at the last glacial maximum, I mean, more or less the match with the Florida Grackle's distribution range.
Right.
So then we found, I mean, this bird really answered the climate change and the warming after the last glacial maximum, and this bird expanded their range 300% more after the last glacial maximum. They have a really tiny, they were in a really tiny distribution range, and then within a short time, within 10,000 years, they got really bigger distribution range.
Which makes sense. Which makes sense with what I discussed a moment ago too. Yeah, they're very adaptable to changes in the climate and in the ecology of an area, right? Because this is before the forests were cleared, obviously. Yeah.
Right. This is a nice biogeographical situation, and then they expanded their range, and probably two different subspecies, versicolor and stony, get together during this expansion. They got some different color form, head color form, but they got together and got lots of gene flow. This makes the two different subspecies, I mean, lumped together. So the climate change effect, probably historical climate change effect. Then we also did another analysis to understand the future of the species, and we made a model based on this range expansion scenario and try to understand what will happen in 2070, 80, and 2100. And we got this map, and this the dashed line here, the present distribution range, almost the present distribution range. But based on the model, probably 30, 40 years later from now, we might see common grackle the western part of the Rocky Mountains and also even in Alaska.
Yeah, along the Pacific coast there. And it's interesting, of course, it's just anecdotal, but as I mentioned before, there are already records of common grackle in California. Northern California. I think there's an Alaska record. I could be wrong, but point is that there are some birds showing up there already, and so maybe it's starting. Of course, every one of those records is versicolor, is the bronze form, because they would be coming from the western part of the species range, presumably.
Right.
Yeah.
So this bird, I mean, getting probably more widespread based on the climate change issue. So they are not going to get shrinkage pattern, probably get more expansion.
But I think we got to keep in mind, though, that what we just talked about is that their numbers have been going down. In fact, they're on the near threatened list. So,
Right.
you
But
know, it's a
based on
dynamic
climate
kind of
models,
thing.
right. But based on the climate models, their habitat or their climate preference, based on our models, is going to be more suitable in North America.
Yeah.
But of course, numbers can change or get lower
Yeah.
because of the other factors. So
Right.
we are just taking here the climate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think Peter, we got the end of the presentation, but I have one more slide. I mean,
Yeah.
like I really like this picture, and one of your friends, I mean, got this picture, so
Yeah,
you can.
Sharon Dorsey, is a photographer out on Long Island. She let us use these photos. I also want to say that a lot of people were involved in different aspects of the study. And I can't name
Right.
everybody, but you know, everyone is acknowledged. People who helped us with the DNA, some funding, um, places for me to stay and go to collect, a whole bunch of different things. So you know, can't mention everybody individually, but thanks to people who helped.
I mean, I can honestly say Peter did very nice job and finished his PhD and did all these measurements and collecting, and he was really, I mean, patient to get this thesis done. So, but he did very nice job. I mean, many congratulations, Peter. So you
Okay.
deserve it. Yeah, definitely. So, and we work together. I know the process, what you
Yeah.
did. So I say honestly.
Well, it
Okay, so we sorry.
helps to have an interesting bird, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
And
interesting bird
we're
and
not
interesting biography.
and we're not finished.
No, we are not finished. We are continuing. We try to continue. But this is the, I mean, let's say the first part, and at least we finished your PhD and you
Well,
finished your PhD.
it would be very interesting to do some things with vocalizations. We've got a paper out with head color information.
Oh, yes, we
Um,
are waiting right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. That's been a little bit of a bone of contention with some people, but
right. I mean, we should just tell we are going to get more evidence. I mean, we already submitted the paper. We are waiting the result right now. But yeah,
yeah,
based on the head color, we have more evidence supporting our subspecies definite subspecies
yeah.
recognize what should I say subspecies decision.
No,
Yeah,
yeah, and you know, again, distribution. I think the distribution is pretty clear, and you know, these northern birds that are all mixed, that people can't tell this and that. I think it's just easier for them to refer to them as northern common grackle. And once you know, I mean, southern birds are going to show up occasionally in the north. There's some skins, you know.
that's
Um,
true.
uh, like I said, the bronze still needs to show up in Florida, as far as I know. You know, they move around. There'll be a couple of these records and stuff, but you know, I think it's a fuzzy line, but uh, those boundaries do exist between these subspecies. So
Right. I mean,
yeah,
it's a beautiful bird. I made a
yeah.
full screen.
What color is its head?
I mean, bluish,
Yeah, right.
right?
Not bluish. It's blue.
Blue, yeah, and it's scary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. A lot of people say it's very difficult to tell what color the head is, and sometimes that's true.
it's blue.
But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
blue.
yeah.
It's
But
very bright, nice blue.
yeah, it's iridescent. So if it moves a little bit, it can get a little more violet. But overall, it's a blue head. Oh, yeah,
Okay. So,
excellent.
I mean, this is the last slide that we had. I mean, yeah, thank you so much, Peter. I mean, it's a
Oh,
nice
sure.
work.
Yeah,
A nice series of papers, and
yeah,
hopefully we will get another one. So we are waiting. So
yeah,
yeah, this is the end of the presentation. Today we picked up the common Grackle and talk about Peter's PhD and all these biogeographical stories about North America. So there are similar species probably shared the same kind of stories in North America, but common Grackle, especially common Grackle, really interesting bird.
yeah.
So okay, so we are gonna meet again for another episode. Today we just got the end. it's a little bit longer version
Okay.
because we talked the common Grackle study. Peter did it, and I involved this study. So we prefer to talk a little longer. And thank you very much. And please,
Sure.
I'm gonna say something to audience. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we need some support. And yeah, just share this video with the other people interested in birds or natural history in general, biogeography. It's gonna help. And yeah, we are happy to share all this information frequently. Thank you very much.
Okay, I seem to have gone into the dark background.
Yeah, that's fine. You look fine.
Now it's nighttime.
Nighttime. Yeah. So we are finishing the presentation. Okay.
All
So
right.
I'll see you, Peter, the next time.
Okay. Thanks, Utku.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.